Book 20. Achilles on the Rampage. By Jove's permission, all the gods descend to aid on both parts for the Greeks contend. Juno, Minerva, Neptune, Mulciber, and Mercury, the deities that prefer the Trojan part, are Phoebus, Cyprides, Phoebe, Latona, and the foe to peace with bright Scamander. Neptune in a mist preserves Aeneas daring to resist. Achilles by whose hand much scathe is done, besides the slaughter of old Priam's son, young Polydore, whose rescue Hector makes, him flying Phoebus to his rescue takes. The rest all shunning their importunate fates, Achilles beats even to the Ilian gates. In Upsilon strife stirs in heaven, the day's grace to the Greeks is given. The Greeks thus armed and made insatiate with desire of fight about thee, Peleus' son, the foe in ground of greatest height, stood opposite ranged. Then Jove charged Themis from Olympus' top to call a court. She every way dispersed, and summoned up all deities, not any flood besides Oceanus, but made appearance not a nymph that arbors odorous, the heads of floods and flowery meadows make their sweet abodes, was absent there, but all at his court, that is the king of gods, assembled, and in lightsome seats of admirable frame, performed, for Jove by Vulcan sat, even angry Neptune came, nor heard the goddess with unwilling ear, but with the rest made free ascension from the sea, and did his state invest. In midst of all began the council, and inquired of Jove his reason for that session, and on what point did move his high intention for the foes. He thought the heat of war was then near breaking out in flames. But to him the thunderer, thou knowest this counsel by the rest of those four purposes that still inclined me. My cares still must succour the distress of Troy, though in the mouth of fate, yet vow I not to stir one step from off this top of heaven, but all if e'er refer to anyone. Here I'll hold state and freely take the joy of either's fate. Help whom ye please, for 'tis assured that Troy not one day's conflict can sustain against the Achilles. Heaven opposed not. His mere lucks through darts enow to impress their powers with trembling, but when blows sent from his fiery hand, thrice heat by slaughter of his friend, shall come and countermand their former glories. We have fear that though fate keep their wall, he'll overturn it. Then descend, and cease not till ye all add ye all your aids, mix earth and heaven together with the fight, Achilles urgeth. These his words did such a war excite, as no man's power could wrestle down. The gods with parted hearts departed heaven, and made from earth war. To guide the Grecian darts, Juno and Pallas with the god that doth the earth embrace, and most for man's use Mercury, whom goodwise inwards grace, were partially and all employed, and with them halted down. The proud of his strength lame Mulciber, his walkers quite misgrown, but made him tread exceeding sure to aid the Ilian side. The changeable now in arms went Mars, and him accompanied Diana that delights in shafts, and Phoebus never shorn, and Aphrodite laughter pleased, and she of whom was born still young Apollo, and the flood that runs on golden sands, bright Xanthus. All these aided Troy, and till these lent their hands, the Grecians triumphed in the aid Achilles did add, the Trojans trembling with his sight so gloriously clad. He overshined the field. Mars no harmfuller than he, let fall the gods amongst their troops. The field swelled and the fight grew fierce and horrible. The dame, that armies doth excite, thundered with clamour, sometimes set a dike without the wall, sometimes on the bellowing shore, and on the other side the call of Mars to fight was terrible. He cried out like a storm, set on the city's pinnacles, and there he would inform sometimes his heartenings, other times where Simois pours on his silver current at the foot of high Callicolon. And thus the blessed gods both sides urged. They all stood in the midst and break contention to the host. And over all their heads the gods' king in abhorred claps, his thunder rattled out. Beneath them Neptune tossed the earth, and mountains round about bowed with affright and shook their heads. Jove's hill the earthquake felt, steep Ida trembling at her roots, and all her fountains spilt. Their brows all crannied, Troy did nod, the Grecian navy played, as on the sea the infernal king, that all the things phrase was frayed, and leaped affright from his throne, cried out, lest over him Neptune should rend into the earth, and so his house so dim, so loathsome, filthy, abhorred of all the gods besides, should open both to gods and men. And thus all things shook and cried when this black battle of the gods was joining, thus arrayed 'gainst Neptune, Phoebus with winged shafts, 'gainst Mars, the blue-eyed maid, 'gainst Juno, Phoebe, whose white hands bore singing darts of gold, her side armed with a sheaf of shafts, and by the birth twofold bright Latona, sister twin to him that shoots so far. Against Latona, Hermes stood, grave guard in peace and war of human beings. Against the god whose empire is in fire, the watery godhead, that great flood, to show whose power and tire and spoil as the other, all his stream on lurking whirlpits trod, Xanthus by gods, by men, Scamander called. Thus god against god entered the field. Achilles sustained a fervent mind to cope with Hector. Past all these his spirit stood inclined to glut Mars with the blood of him. And at Achilles Apollo sent Anchises' son, but first he did impress a more than natural strength in him, and made him feel the excess infused from heaven. Lycaon's shape gave show to his address, old Priam's son, and thus he spake, Thou counsellor Troy, when now fly out those threats that late pull out our peers and joy of thy fight with Achilles, thy tongue, once steeped in wine, durst vaunt as much. He answered him, But why wouldst thou? Line, my powers against that proud enemy, and against my present heat. I mean not now to bid him blows, that fear sounds my retreat, that heretofore discouraged me, when after he had raised Lyrnessus and strong Pedasus, he still breathed fury, chased our oxen from Tyrian hill, and set on me, but Jove gave strength and knees, and bore me off, that had not walked above the centre now, but propped by him, Minerva's hand that held. A light to her favourite, whose beams showed and impelled his powers to spoil, had ruined me, and for these ears heard her cry, Kill, kill the seed of Iliad, till the Asian Iliad. Their men then must not fight with him that still hath gods to friend, averting deaths on others' darts, and giving his no end, but with the ends of men. God's like fortune in the fight would give my forces, not with ease winged victory showed light on his proud shoulders, nor he scaped, though all of brass he boasts his plight consistent. He replied, Pray thou those gods of host, whom he implores, as well as he, and his chance may be thine. Thou camest of gods like him, the queen that reigns in Salamine. Fame sounds thy mother, her derived of lower deity, old Nereus' daughter bearing him. Bear then thy heart as high, and thy unwearied steel as right, nor utterly be beat with only cruelty of words, not proof against a threat. This strengthened him, and forth he rushed, nor could his strength fly. Why wristed Juno, nor his drifts, she every deity of the Achilles faction, called to her and said, Ye must have care. Neptune and Pallas for the frame. Neptune and Pallas for the frame of this important war. Ye undertake here. Venus' son by Phoebus, being impelled on runs on Achilles, turn him back, or see our friend upheld by one of us. Let not the spirit of Achilles be overdared, but make him know the mightiest deities. Stand kind to him, and that the gods, protectors of these towers that fight against Greece, and who are here before our enemies' eminent powers, bear no importance, and besides, that all we stoop from heaven to curb this fight, that no impaired to be his person given by any Trojans nor their aids, while this day bears the sun. Hereafter all things are wrapped in his birth thread and spun. By Parcas in that point of time his mother gave him heir. He must sustain. But if report perform not the repair of all this to him by the voice of some immortal state, he may be fearful if some god should set on him that fate makes him her minister. The gods, when they appear to men and manifest their proper forms, are passing dreadful then. Neptune replied, Saturnia, at no time let your care exceed your reason. 'Tis not fit. Where only humans are, we must not mix the hands of gods. Our odds is too extreme. Sit we by some place of height, where we may see to them and leave the wars of men to men. But if we see them then, so Mars or Phoebus enter the fight, or offer least offence to Thetis' son, not giving free way to his conquering rage, then comes the conflict to our cares. We soon shall disengage Achilles, and send them to heaven to settle their abode, with equals flying under strifes. This said, the black-haired god led to the tower of Hercules, built circular and high by Pallas and the Ilians, for fit security, to Jove's divine son against the whale, and drave him from the shore to the ample field. There Neptune sat, and all the gods that bore the Greeks good meaning, casting all thick mantles made of clouds on their bright shoulders. The opposed gods sat hid in other shrouds on top of steep Calicolon, about thy golden sides, O Phoebus, brandisher of darts, and thine, whose rage abides no peace in cities. In this state these gods in council sate, at lingering purpose fight, to try who first would elevate his heavenly weapon. High-throned Jove cried out to set them on, said all the field was full of men, and that the earth did groan with feet of proud encounters, burned with the arms of men and barbed horse. Two champions for both the armies then met in their midst, prepared for blows. Divine Achilles and Venus' son. Aeneas first stepped threatening forth, Preece, his high helm nodding, and his breast barred with a shady shield. He shook his javelin, Thetis' son did his part to the field, as when the harmful king of beasts sore threatened to be slain. By all the country up in arms, at first makes coy disdain, prepare resistance, but at last, when anyone hath led bold charge upon him with his dart, he turns yawning head, fell anger lathers in his jaws, his great heart swells, his stern lasheth his strength up, sides and thighs waddled with stripes to learn their own power, his eyes glow, he roars, and in he leaps to kill, secure of killing, so his power then roused up to his will, matchless Achilles, coming on to meet Anchises' son. Both near Achilles thus inquired, Why standst thou thus alone, thou son of Venus? Calls thy heart to change of blows with me? Sure Troy's whole kingdom is proposed, someone hath promised thee the throne of Priam for my life, but Priam's self is wise, and for my slaughter not so mad to make his throne thy prize. Priam hath sons to second him, is then some piece of land past others fit to set and sow, that thy victorious hand the Ilians offer for my head. I hope that prize will prove no easy conquest. Once, I think, my busy javelin drove with terror those thoughts from your spleen. Retain'st thou not the time when single on the Ilian hill I took thee with the crime of runaway, thy oxen left, and when thou hadst no face, I could see thy knees bereft it, and Lyrnessus was to mask for that. Then that mask too I opened to the air by Jove and Pallas' help, and took the free light from fair, your ladies bearing prisoners, but Jove and the other gods then saft thee. Yet again I hope they will not add their odds to save thy wants, as thou presumest. Retire then, aim not at Troy's throne by me. Fly ere the soul flies, fools are wise too late. He answered him, hope not the words can childlike terrify my stroke-proof breast. I well could speak in this indecency and use tart terms, but we know well what stock us both put out. Too gentle, To bear fruits so rude our parents ring about the world's round bosom, and by fame their dignities are blown to both our knowledges, by sight neither to either known. Thine, mine eyes, nor mine to thee. Fame sounds thy worthiness from famous Peleus, the sea nymph, that hath the loveliest tress. Thetis, thy mother, I myself affirm my sire to be. Great-souled Anchises, she that holds the Paphian deity, my mother, and of these light is now to exhale the tears for their loved issue. Thee or me, childish, unworthy dares, are not enough to part our powers. For if thy spirits want due excitation by distrust of that desert, I vaunt to set up all the rest of my life I'll lineally prove, which many will confirm my race. First cloud commanding Jove was sire to Dardanus, that built Dardania, for the walls of sacred Ilion spread not yet these fields, those fair-built halls of diverse languaged men, not raised all then, made populous the foot of Ida's fountful hill. This Jove got Dardanus, begot King Erectonius, for wealth past all compares of living mortals. In his fens he fed 3,000 mares, all neighing by their tender foals, of which twice 6 were bred by lofty Boreas, their dams loved by him as they fed. He took the brave form of a horse that shook an azure mane, slept with them. These twice 6 colts had pace so swift they ran upon the top ales of corn ears, nor bent them any whit. And when the broad back of the sea their pleasure was to sit, the superficies of his waves they slid upon their hooves. Not dipped in dank sweet of his brows of Erectonius' love sprang Tros, the king of Trojans. Tros 3 young princes bred, Ilus, renowned as Saracus, and heavenly Ganymede, the fairest youth of all that breed, whom for his beauty's love the gods did ravish to their state, to bear the cup to Jove. Ilus begot Laomedon, godlike Laomedon, got Theton, Priam, Clytius, Mars-like Hicetaon, and Lampus. Great Assaracus Capys begot, and he Anchises. Prince Anchises, me. King Priam, Hector. We sprang both of one high family. Thus fortunate men give birth, but Jove gives virtue. He augments, he impairs the worth of all men, and his will their rule. He strongest all strengths afford. Why then paint we, like dames, the face of conflict with our words? Both may give language that a ship driven with 100 oars would overburden. A man's tongue is voluble, pours words out of all sorts every way, such as you speak you hear. What then need we vie calumnies, like women that will wear their tongues out? Being once incensed, to strive for strife to part, being on their way they travel so. From words may avert, from virtue not. It is your steel divine, Achilles, must prove my proof, as mine shall yours. Thus amply did he ease his great heart of his pedigree. Sharply sent away a dart that caught Achilles' shield, and rung so it did fray the son of Thetis, his fair hand far thrusting out his shield, for fear the long lance had driven through. A fool to think 'twould yield, and not to know the gods' firm gifts want to yield so soon to men's poor powers. The eager lance had only conquest one of 2 plates, and the shield had 5. The shield had 5, 2 forged of tin, 2 brass, one that was centre plate of gold, and that forbade the pass of Incassiades' lance, and then sent Achilles forward. His lance, that through the first fold struck where brass of little worth had no great proof of hides were lain, though all which Peleus ran, his iron head, and after it his ashen body wan, passed to the earth, and there it stuck, his top on the other side, and hung the shield up, which hard down, Aeneas plucked to hide his breast from sword blows, shrunk up round, and in his heavy eye was much grief shadowed, much afraid that Peleus stuck so nigh. Then prompt Achilles rushing in, his sword drew, and the field rung with his voice. Aeneas now left and let hang his shield, and all distracted up he snatched a 2 men's strength of stone, and either at his shield or casque he set it rudely on, nor carved where, so it struck a place that put on arms for death. But he, Achilles, came so close, had doubtless sunk beneath his own death, had not Neptune seen and interposed the odds of his divine power, uttering this to the Achaean gods: "Grieve for this great-hearted man. He will be sent to hell, even instantly, by Peleus' son, being only moved to deal by Phoebus' words. What fool is he! Phoebus did never mean to add to his great words, his God against the ruin then summoned against him. What cause hath he to head him on to others' miseries, he being clear of any trespass done against the Grecians? Thankful gifts he oft hath given to us. Let us then quit him, withdraw this combat, for if thus Achilles end him, Jove will rage, since his escape in fate is proposed, lest the progeny of Dardanus take date, whom Jove, past all his issue, loved, begot of mortal dames. All Priam's race he hates, and this must propagate the names of Trojans and their sons' rule to all posterity." Saturnia said, "Make free your pleasure, save or let him die. Pallas and I have taken many and most public oaths, that till they never shall avert her eye, red with our wraths, from hated Troy. No, not when all in studied fire she flames the Greek rage, bloating her last coal. This nothing turned his aims from present rescue, but through all the whizzing spears he passed, and came where both were combating, when instantly he cast a mist before Achilles' eyes, drew from the earth and shield his lance, and laid it at his feet, and when took up and held aloft the light Anchises' son, who passed with Neptune's force whole orders of heroes' heads and many a troop of horse, leaped over till the bounds he reached of all the fervent broil, where all the Caucons' quarters lay, thus far freed from the toil. Neptune had time to use these words: "Aeneas, who was he of all the gods that did so much neglect thy good and thee to urge the fight with Thetis' son, who in immortal rates is better than more dear than thee? Hereafter less fates. Hell be thy headlong home. Retire, make bold stand, never near where he advanceth. But his fate once satisfied, then bear a free and full sail. No Greek shall end thee else." This revealed, he left him, and dispersed the cloud that all his act concealed, and vexed Achilles, who again had clear light from the sky. And much disdaining the escape, said, "O ye guard mine eyes, discover miracles. My lance submitted, and he gone, whom I sent with desire of his confusion. Aeneas sure was loved of heaven. I thought his vaunt from thence had flowed from glory. Let him go, no more experience will his mind long for of my hands. He flies them now so clear. Cheer then the Greeks, and others try." Thus ranged he everywhere, the Grecian orders every man of which the most looked on, to see their fresh lord shake his lance. He thus put charge upon: "Divine Greeks, stand not thus at gaze, but man to man, aptly your several valours. 'Tis a task laid too unequally on me, left to so many men, one man opposed to all, not Mars immortal and a god, not war's she general. A field of so much fight should chase, and work it out with blows, but what a man may execute, that all limbs will expose, and all their strength to utmost nerve, though now I lost some play, by some strange miracle no more shall burn in vain the day, to any least beam. All this host I'll ransack and have hope. Of all and not one again will scape, whoever gives such scope to his adventure, and so near dares tempt my angry lance." Thus he excited. Hector then as much strives to advance the hearts of his men, adding threats, affirming that he would stand in combat with the Achaeans. "Give fear," said he. "No hand of your great hearts, brave Ilians, for Peleus' talking son. I'll fight with any god with words, but when their spears put on, The work runs high, their strength exceeds mortality so far, that they may make works crown their words, which holds not in the war. Achilles makes his hands of bounds, this word he shall make good, and leave another to the field. His worse shall be withstood. With sole objection of myself, though in his hands he bear a rage like fire, though fire itself his raging fingers were, and burning steel flew in his strength. Thus he incited his, and they raised lances, and to work with mixed courages, and up flew clamour. But the heat in Hector Phoebus gave, thus temper. Do not meet, said he, any single brave. The man thou threatenest but impress, and in thy strength impeach his violence, for far off or near his sword or dart will reach. The god's voice made a difference in Hector's own conceit, betwixt his and Achilles' words, and gave such overweight as weighed him back into his strength, and curbed his flying out. That all threw fierce the Achilles, and gave a horrid shout. The first of all he put to dart was fierce Iphition, surnamed Otryntides, whom Neis, water nymph, made son, the town destroyer Otrynteus, beneath the snowy hill of Tmolus, in the wealthy town of Hida, at his will, where many able men at arms he rushing on in tuck full. Pelides' lance in his head's missed, that cleft into his skull. Achilles knew him one much famed, and thus insulted then. Thou'rt dead, Otryntides, though called the terriblest of men. While race runs at Gygaeus' lake, there thy inheritance lay, near fishy Hyllus and the gulfs of Hermus, but this day removes thee to the fields of Troy. Thus he left night to seize his closed eyes, his body laid in course of all the priests, which Grecian horse broke with strakes nailed to their chariot wheels. Next, through the temples burst the eyes of his deadly javelin seals of great in Troy Antenor's son, renowned Demelion. A mighty turner of a field, his overthrow set gone Hippodamus, who leaped from horse, and as he fled before Achilles turned back, he made a fell Peleus gore, and forth he plucked his flying soul. And as a tortured bull to Neptune brought for sacrifice, a troop of youngsters pull down to the earth and drag him round about the hallowed shore, to please the watery deity, which forcing him to roar, and forth he pours his utmost throat, so bellowed this slain friend of flying Ilion with the breath that gave his being end. Then rushed he on, and in his eye had heavenly Polydore, old Priam's son, whom last of all his fruitful princess bore, and for his youth being dear to him, the king forbade to fight, yet hot of unexperienced blood, to show how exquisite he was afoot, for which of all the 50 sons he held the special name. He flew before the first heat of the field, even till he flew out breath and soul, which though he back the lance of swift Achilles put in air, and did his head advance out at his navel. On his knees the poor prince crying fell, and gathered with his tender hands his entrails, that did swell quite through the wide wound, till a cloud as black as death concealed their sight and all the world from him. When Hector had beheld his brother tumbled so to earth, his entrails still at hand, his dark sorrow overcast his eyes, nor far off could he stand a minute longer, but like fire he brake out of the throng, shook his long lance at Thetis' son, and then came he along to feed the encounter. Oh, said he, here comes the man that most of all the world destroys my mind, the man by whom I lost my dear Patroclus. Now not long the crooked paths of war can yield us any privy scapes. Come, keep not off so far, he cried to Hector. Make the pain of thy sure death as short, as one so desperate of his life hath reason. In no sort this frighted Hector, who bore clothes, and said, Achilles, leave threats for children. I have power to thunder calumnies as well as others, and well know thy strength superior far, that my nerves hold, but the gods, not nerves, determine war, and yet for nerves there will be found a strength of power in mine to drive a lance home to thy life. My lance as well as thine hath point and sharpness, and 'tis this. Thus brandishing his spear, he set it flying, which a breath of Pallas back did bear from Thetis' son to Hector's self, and at his feet it fell. Achilles used no dart, but close flew in, and thought to deal with no strokes, but of sure dispatch. But what with all his blood, he laboured Phoebus cleared with ease, as being a god and stud for Hector's guard, as Pallas did, Achilles for thine. He wrapped him from him, and a cloud of much night cast between his person and the point opposed. Achilles then exclaimed, O see, yet more gods are at work, Apollo's hand hath framed. Dog that thou art, thy rescue now, to whom go pay thy vows. Thy safety owes him. I shall vent in time those fatal blows that yet beat on in my heart on thine, if any god remain my equal forter. In meantime my anger must maintain his fire on other Ilians. Then let he at his feet great Demachus, Philetor's son, and Dryope did greet with like encounter. Dardanus and strong Laogonus, wise Bias' son, he hurled from horse, and of one victorious. With his closed sword, the other's life he conquered with his lance. Then Tros, Alastor's son, made in, and sought to escape their chance with free submission. Then down he fell, and prayed about his knees. He could not kill him, but take ruth as one that destinies made to that purpose, being a man born in the selfsame year that he himself was. Oh, poor fool! To sue to him to bear a ruthful mind, he well might know he could not fashion him in ruth's soft mould. He had no spirit to brook that interim. In his hot fury, he was none of these remorseful men, gentle and affable, but fierce at all times, and mad then. He gladly would have made a prayer, and still so hugged his knee, he could not quit him, till at last his sword was fain to free his fettered knees, that made a vent for his white liver's blood, that caused such pitiful effects, of which it poured a flood about his bosom, which it filled, even till it drowned his eyes, and all sense failed him. Forth then flew this princes of tragedies. Who next stooped Mulius even to heaven with his insatiate spear? One ear it entered, and made good his pass to the other ear. Echeclus then, Agenor's son, he struck betwixt the brows, whose blood set fire upon his sword, that cooled it to the throes of his then labouring brain, let out his soul so fixed fate, and gave cold entry to black death. Deucalion then had state in these men's beings, where the nerves about the elbow knit. Down to his hand his spear steel pierced, and brought such pain to it, as led death jointly, whom he saw before his fainting eyes, and in his neck felt with a stroke laid on, so that off flies his head, one of the twice 12 bones that all the backbone make. Let out his marrow when the head he helm and all did take, and hurled amongst the Ilians. Body stretched on the earth. Rigmus of fruitful Thrace fell next. He was the famous birth of Piraeus. His belly's midst the lance took, whose stern force quite tumbled him from chariot. In turning back the horse, their guider, Erithus, received another lance that threw him to his lord. No end was put to the mischance Achilles entered, but as fire fallen in a flash from heaven, inflames the high woods of dry hills, and with a storm is driven through all the sylvan deeps, and raves till down goes everywhere the smothered hill. So every way Achilles and his spear consumed the champaign. The black earth flowed with the veins he tore. He looked how oxen yoken, driven about the circular floor of some fair barn, tread suddenly the thick sheaves thin of corn, and all the corn consumed with chaff so mixed and overborne. Beneath Achilles' one-hoofed horse, shields, spears, and men lay trod. His axle trees and chariot wheels all splattered with the blood, hurled from the steed's hooves and the strakes, thus to be magnified. His most inaccessible hands in human blood he died.